name of Martin Luther King shook the land like a rolling thunder. May the bells of freedom ring today with a dream of beauty that they could not burn away. Just another holy man tried to be a friend. My God, they killed him. The only Son of God Almighty, the Holy One called Jesus Christ. He healed the lame and he fed the hungry. For his love they took his life away. On the road to glory, where the story never ends. Just the Holy Son of Man we will never understand. My God, they killed him. We sing about Mahatma Gandhi, sing of Martin Luther King, sing of Jesus Christ Almighty and the brothers Kennedy.
This is a new day. This is a new day full of sound, bright January light. Look at that sky, wow. And expectation. This day has been waiting. This day has been waiting especially for you, to embrace you, to guide you. This day has been waiting with open arms, just for you. This is the day we have been given. Let's not waste it. Come now, and let us worship together. Please rise in body or spirit for our first hymn. It's 162 in the gray hymnal. Gonna lay down my sword and shield.
Gonna lay down my sword and shield down by the riverside, down by the riverside, down by the riverside. Gonna lay down my sword and shield down by the riverside. Gonna study war no more. No, I ain't gonna study war no more. 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 Ain't gonna study war no more. I'm gonna lay down my burden down by the riverside, down by the riverside, down by the riverside. I'm gonna lay down my burden down by the riverside and study war no more. No, I ain't gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. 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 I'm gonna shake hands around the world down by the riverside. Everywhere I roam, churches around the world. Everywhere I roam and study, war no more. Let me hear you sing. No, ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. No, I ain't gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. We ain't gonna study war no more.
Hello, my name is Riss Fraley, and I'm glad to welcome you to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Youngstown, UUYO for short. We have a few announcements this morning. Our annual meeting will be following the service next Sunday, January 22nd. All members in active standing are able to vote, so please join us for that. This coming Saturday at 9 a.m. on January 21st in Channing Hall and on Zoom, you're welcome to join Reverend Joseph and Reverend Dyken Nelson in a time of Zen meditation and discussion. Last but not least, there's going to be a work party here at the church following meditation this Saturday at 10 a.m.
Hi, my name is Ryan Striefler, and for our chalice lighting today, I'm going to read a selection from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s last speech, I Have Been to the Mountaintop, which he gave on April 3rd, which was the evening before he was murdered in Memphis, Tennessee. Many people don't realize, but Dr. King, for what's arguably one of his 3 top most famous speeches, I Have Been to the Mountaintop, was ill that evening and was not going to speak in Memphis. He did not show up to the event because of a sore throat and the flu, but the crowd was so disappointed that somebody ran back and got him from the hotel, and he agreed to speak very briefly. It's one of his briefest speeches as a result. So, let me read an excerpt. The rest of this is a quote. I'm happy to live in this period because we've been forced to a point where we are going to have to grapple with the problems that men have been trying to grapple with throughout history, but the demands didn't force them to do it. Survival demands that we grapple with them. Men, for years now, have been talking about war and peace, but now no longer can they just talk about it. It's no longer a choice between violence and nonviolence in this world. It's nonviolence or non-existence. That is where we are today. And also in the human rights revolution, if something isn't done and done in a hurry to bring the colored peoples of the world out of their long years of poverty, their long years of hurt and neglect, the whole world is doomed. Now I'm just happy that God has allowed me to live in this period to see what is unfolding. And I'm happy that he's allowed me to be in Memphis. And that's all this whole thing is about. We aren't engaged in any negative protest and in any negative arguments with anybody. We are saying that we are determined to be men, that we are determined to be people. We are saying we are God's children, and that we're God's children and we don't have to live like we're forced to live. Now, what does all this mean in this great period of history? It means we've got to stay together. We've got to stay together and maintain unity. It's all right to talk about long white robes over yonder and all of its symbolism. But it's ultimately that people want some suits and dresses and shoes to wear down here. It's all right to talk about streets flowing with milk and honey, but God's commanded us to be concerned about the slums down here and his children who can't eat 3 square meals a day. It's all right to talk about the new Jerusalem, but one day God's preacher must talk about the new New York, the new Atlanta, the new Philadelphia, the new Los Angeles, the new Memphis, Tennessee. This is what we have to do. And the other thing we have to do is this. Always anchor our direct external action with the power of economic withdrawal. Now, we're a poor people. Individually, we're poor when you compare us to the white society in America. We are poor. Never stop and forget that. Collectively, and that means all of us together, collectively, we're richer than all the other nations in the world, with the exception of 9. Did you ever think about that? We don't have to argue with anybody. We don't have to curse and go around acting bad with our words. We don't need bricks or bottles. We don't need any Molotov cocktails. We just need to go to the stores, to these massive industries in our country, and say, God sent us here to say that you're not treating his children right. And we've come by here to ask you to make the first item on your agenda fair treatment where God's children are concerned. Now, if you're not prepared to do that, we have an agenda that we must follow, and our agenda calls for withdrawing all economic support from you. These are practical things we can do. We can begin the process of building a bigger economic base. And at the same time, that puts pressure where it really hurts. I ask you all to follow through here. Now let me say as I move to my conclusion, we've got to give ourselves to the struggle until the end. Nothing would be more tragic than to stop at this point in Memphis. We've got to see it through. And when we have our march, you need to be there. If it means leaving work, if it means leaving school, be there. Be concerned about your brother. You might not be on strike, but either we go up together or we go down together. Let us develop a kind of dangerous unselfishness. One day a man came to Jesus, and he wanted to raise some questions about some vital matters in life. At points, he wanted to trick Jesus and to show him he knew a little bit more than Jesus knew and to throw him off base. Now, these questions could have easily ended up in a philosophical and theological debate, but Jesus immediately pulled that question from midair and placed it on a dangerous curve between Jerusalem and Jericho. And he talked about a certain man who fell among thieves. And you might remember that a Levite and a priest passed by him on the other side, and they didn't stop to help him. And finally, a man of another race came by, and he got down from his beast and decided to be compassionate. And he got down, administered first aid, and helped the man in need. Jesus ended up saying, this was a good man. This was the great man, because he had the capacity to project the I into the thou and to be concerned about his brother. We light this chalice in the spirit of all Dr. King has meant to this world.
Good morning. So this is my granddaughter, Amari, and you might have noticed she's special, very special and beautiful. And this is her mother, Katrina. We call her Kat. So we're gonna look at the book. We're gonna look at the book. So our book today is called Who Was Martin Luther King Jr.? Look. And it is by Lisbeth Kaiser. Opens up, see. Martin's home was very happy. He had a big sister, a little brother, a father, and a mother, and they were all kind to one another. Martin was filled with love. Martin also liked being at church. He learned to get along with everyone there, and he made many friends. Martin was filled with kindness. At home and at church, Martin was taught to love everyone, but not everyone was taught to love him. One day, Martin's best friend said he couldn't play with him anymore because Martin's skin was a different color. Martin was black, and his friends were white. In Martin's city and in many other places, black people were treated unfairly. It made him sad and sometimes angry. Martin wished that all people would be kind and fair to one another. He studied and he learned, and he thought about how to change things. When Martin grew up, he became a reverend and an activist. He was a leader in his community. When he spoke, his words came from his big, strong heart and filled people up with love and kindness. Martin said that everyone should be treated fairly and that we should never hurt one another. He said that we could change the world peacefully. Not everyone wanted things to change, but lots and lots of people agreed with Martin. Martin showed them that they could be brave and peaceful even when they felt scared or angry. Together, they worked to show everyone else that things needed to change. You can let her go. You can let her go. Huh. One day, Martin gave a very big speech about his dream of freedom and justice for all. Many people were there to listen. Others watched him on TV. The world still remembers what he said. I have a dream that one day we will stand up for freedom together. All of God's children will be able to join hands and sing, free at last, thank God Almighty, we are free at last. Every year we celebrate Martin's birthday to remember what he did. He filled people's hearts. He worked hard for change. He made the world more fair, and he did it all because he loved people. The end. So after the service today, you are invited to join us downstairs for birthday cake for my son Jimmy as well. We're a really big family. We just doubled in size.
Join me in reciting our covenant, which is in your order of service. As Tim Raridan reminds me, it begins with a very important word. Make sure we enunciate it. Love is the spirit of this church, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
Our church is completely supported by pledge income from members and friends like you. If you wish to make an offering to us, please designate on your check or envelope that it is for UUYO. Our seventh principle calls on us to respect the interdependent web of existence for which we are a part, including nurturing and supporting non-human beings. For January, we will honor this commitment by supporting an organization that was founded to promote responsible pet ownership and assist pet owners in caring for their beloved companions. The fund assists those who have a record of providing a good home for a pet, but whose current incomes do not permit some necessary medical care for an existing pet. The fund gives priorities to seniors on fixed incomes, families experiencing limited funds due to chronic illness, and for whom loss of an existing pet would be harmful, and other persons the trustee shall deem appropriate. We will now receive the offering that supports the life of Youngstown, the Mahoning Valley, and our wider world.
The song I'd like to sing for our offertory this morning was written by Pete Seeger, who was one of the great activists of the 20th century. This is a song called Take It From Dr. King, and it requires you to help me. Okay? So I'm going to sing the chorus that, and if you look in your bulletins there, you'll see the words to this. And if you would just help me on the chorus where it says, "Don't say it can't be done," that's the chorus. And it goes like this. Don't say it can't be done. Can you sing that with me? Don't say it can't be done. The battle's just begun. The battle's just begun. Take it from Dr. King. Let me try that again. Take it from Dr. King. You too can learn to sing, so drop the gun. Take it from Dr. King. You too can learn to sing, so drop the gun. It's a lot to get in there. Down in Alabama, 1955. Not many of us here today were then alive. Young Baptist preacher led a bus boycott. He led the way for a brand new day without firing a shot. Don't say it can't be done. The battle's just begun. Take it from Dr. King, you too can learn to sing, so drop the gun. Oh, those must have been an exciting 13 years. Young heroes and young heroines, there was laughter, there were tears. Students at lunch counters, even dancing in the streets. To think it all started with Sister Rosa refusing to give up her seat. But don't say it can't be done. The path's just begun. Take it from Dr. King, you too can learn to sing, so drop the gun. Songs kept them going and going. They didn't realize the seeds they were sowing. They were singing in the marches, even singing in jail. Songs gave them the courage to believe they would not fail. Don't say it can't be done. The battle's just begun. Take it from Dr. King, you too can learn to sing, so drop the gun. We sang about Alabama 1955, but since we wonder, will this world survive? The world learned a lesson from Dr. King. We can survive, we will survive, we can, we will. Take it, not be done. The battle's just begun. Take it, Dr. King, you too can learn to sing, so drop the gun. One more time. Don't say it can't be done. The battle's just begun. Take it from Dr. King, you too can learn to sing, so drop the gun.
Join me in a few moments of meditation.
Of diversity. I think the other thing that we've got to see is that these young people are saying that there must be a revolution of values in our country. As Jimmy Baldwin said on one occasion, what advantage is there in being integrated into a burning house? And I feel that there is a need for a revolution of values in America, because some of the values that presently exist are certainly out of line with the values and the idealistic structure that brought our nation into being. Unfortunately, we haven't been true to these ideals, and many of the values of so-called white middle-class society are values that need to be reviewed and re-evaluated, and in a real sense, they need to be changed. So I think the young people in the Negro community who are raising these questions are raising some very profound questions about our total society. In other words, they are saying that there must be a restructuring of the architecture of our society where values are concerned. And with this, I would agree with. So in the quest for integration, I think we can offer our whole nation something, because there are three evils in our nation. It's not only racism, but economic exploitation of poverty would be one, and then militarism. And I think in a sense, and in a very real sense, these three are tied inextricably together, and we aren't going to get rid of one without getting rid of the other.
When you stood on the Lincoln Memorial that day in August, '63, and you said, "I had a dream," did that dream envision that you could see a war in Asia preventing the federal government doing for the Negroes, preventing the society doing for the Negroes that which you think had to be done?
No, I didn't envision that then. I must confess that that period was a great period of hope for me. And I'm sure for many others all across the nation, many of the Negroes who had about lost hope, saw a solid decade of progress in the South. And in 1954, which was, 64, 1963, 9 years after the Supreme Court's decision to be in the March on Washington, meant a great deal. It was a high moment, a great watershed moment. But I must confess that that dream that I had that day has at many points turned into a nightmare. Now, I'm not one to lose hope. I keep on hoping. I still have faith in the future. But I've had to analyze many things over the last few years, and I would say over the last few months. I've gone through a lot of soul-searching and agonizing moments, and I've come to see that we have many more difficult days ahead, and some of the old optimism was a little superficial, and now it must be tempered with a solid realism. And I think the realistic fact is that we still have a long, long way to go, and that we are involved in a war on Asian soil, which, if not checked and stopped, can poison the very soul of our nation.
Dr. King, even if there had not been a war in Asia, would you still not have had this nightmare insofar as the Negro movement for equality then touched on two things that the white community holds sacred: their children and their property?
Oh, I have no doubt that we would have encountered great difficulties, great problems of resistance if the war had not been in existence. So that I'm not going to say that all of our problems will be solved if the war in Vietnam is ended. But I do say that the war makes it infinitely more difficult to deal with these problems. When a nation becomes obsessed with the guns of war, it loses its social perspective, and programs of social uplift suffer. This is just a fact of history, so that we do face many more difficulties as a result of the war. It's much more difficult to really arouse a conscience during a time of war. I noticed the other day, some weeks ago, a Negro was shot down in Chicago, and it was a clear case of police brutality. That was on page 30 of the paper, but on page 1 at the top was 780 Viet Cong killed. That is something about a war like this that makes people insensitive. It dulls the conscience. It strengthens the forces of reaction, and it brings into being bitterness and hatred and violence. And it strengthened the military-industrial complex of our country, and it's made our job much more difficult, because I think we can go along with some programs, if we didn't have this war on our hands, that would cause people to adjust to new developments, just as they did in the South. They said they'd never ride the bus with us, blood would flow in the streets, they wouldn't go to school, and all of these things. But when people came to see that they had to do it because the law insisted, they finally adjusted. And I think white people all over this country will adjust once the nation makes it clear that in schools and housing, we've got to learn to live together as brothers. I think the biggest problem now is that we got our gains over the last 12 years at bargain rates, so to speak. Didn't cost the nation anything. In fact, it helped the economic side of the nation to integrate lunch counters and public accommodations. It didn't cost the nation anything to get the right to vote established. And now we are confronting issues that cannot be solved without costing the nation billions of dollars. Now, I think this is where we're getting our greatest resistance. They may put it on many other things, but we can't get rid of slums and poverty without it costing the nation something.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click.
Precious Lord, take my hand, lead me on, let me stand. I'm tired, I'm weak, I'm worn. Through the storm, through the night, lead me on to the light. Take my hand, precious Lord, lead me home. If my way draws drear, precious Lord, linger near. My light is almost gone. Hear my cry, hear my call. Hold my hand, lest I fall. Take my hand, precious Lord, lead me home. The darkness appears and the night draws near and the day is past and gone. At the river I stand, guide my feet, hold my hand, precious Lord, lead me home. Precious Lord, take my hand, lead me on, let me stand. I am tired, I am weak, I'm worn. Oh, the storm through the night, lead me on to the light. Take my hand, precious Lord, lead me home. Take my hand, precious Lord, lead me home.
When I think of Martin Luther King Jr., I still think of Moses in the First Testament. In the last speech he gave before he was killed, he spoke of going to the mountaintop, and I've talked about that in years past. But this morning, I'd like to talk a little bit about the wilderness. The mountaintop experience is helpful, but I think it's the hardships and temptations of the wilderness that truly test our resolve and help us to answer whether we celebrate Martin Luther King Jr. Day as a historical holiday or a present reality. It's actually much simpler if we celebrate Martin Luther King Jr. as a historical holiday, as a day about a man who lived and died doing things which are now historical events. In some ways, it's much easier if we codify that time, bracket it off, and relegate it to history. It's much more tricky to see and feel how the spirit that moved many people during a time of great oppression and great uprising is also alive in this time of great oppression and great potential uprising. There are figures that come along, like Martin Luther King Jr., that serve as a kind of lightning rod for our greatest ideals: justice, love, compassion. I feel very fortunate in many respects to not be a lightning rod. A lightning rod gets struck by lightning. It takes the brunt of society's energy, both good and bad, all in the self. I think it's too much for one person. And yet there are those who bore that unbearable burden for as long as they could until they were eventually struck down. We all know that Martin Luther King Jr. Day is beyond the person of Martin Luther King Jr. In one of his sermons, he said as much. Toward the end of his life, he said, "When I die, please do not eulogize me with my list of accomplishments. Please do not say I won the Nobel Peace Prize. Say simply and straightforwardly that I tried to be a good person." In another sermon, he interpreted greatness. He said, "Anyone can be great because anyone can serve." He was more than he was, just as we are more than we are. We are the living possibilities of our greatest values. All of us are that possibility. And the thing about possibility, which no one tells us but is clear from history, it is as much inspiring to us, this possibility, as it is frightening to us. We, if you look around, are terribly afraid of possibility. We wish to try to limit that possibility to a few individuals or a single individual, if we can help it. And in time, that possibility, we make up in our mind the story that it gets extinguished because of one individual. And as a society, we might feel somewhat safe for a while because we feel we've avoided that great fear of possibility. But you can't really kill it. It's released back to the ether, and it comes right back to us and taunts us every year with its existence. A possibility looking for life. A possibility looking, hoping to live as us. In the wilderness, it's easy to lose sight of that. The wilderness is a place where it seems we are traveling in circles. It's hard to trust that we're going anywhere at all, because the scenery looks derivative of scenery we've seen before. Thoughts of settling come easily into our heads. We think maybe if we just settled in one of these towns, if we acclimated to the society as it currently is, if we taught ourselves to want what society teaches us to want, we could live an easier life. what is the use of all this wilderness business anyway? I'm just a simple human being who wants comfort, good food, shelter. No one is looking to me for liberation, freedom from oppression. Probably no one would even notice if I just stopped altogether and stayed. These are the common thoughts, I think, at least I've had in the wilderness at times. We easily, maybe too easily, rationalize ourselves out of the kind of love that is possible. We do that when we relegate others to history. We say this person existed and that was great, or we lose faith in the old visions, as if the vision belonged to a single individual, when in truth the vision was our vision. It was for us. My sense in this time, and this is not an original thought, is that communities, churches like this, are one of the greatest possibilities for our people at this moment. A lot of us are trained, myself included, to only think of ourselves and our own life in this culture. And that has its benefits, actually. It's not all bad. It's how we're trained to think of ourselves in this society. What's best for me? But I think what we're doing here in this church, or at least trying to do, if we're honest, that includes each of us, is to open ourselves to something that's much bigger than us. It's creating a space where the principles we value might truly live. We take them off the page. We take them off our covenant, the words on our page, and we give them voice. We give them flesh. We give these principles hands to work with, bodies to manifest them. In an eerie way, it sounds a little like possession, except it's voluntary, and we can always opt out. That is what I think we partly admire about Martin Luther King Jr., about Gandhi, about Rosa Parks, about many others. The willingness to be possessed by love in their actual bodies, not in theory, in their actual bodies, in their actual time, even when the cost was great. You never forget it when you see it. I've seen it up close a number of different times. I remember vividly at Standing Rock watching Lakota elders walk up to military personnel pointing machine guns at their faces, guarding a pipeline. I witnessed a kind of steadfastness and peace, which I've never forgotten. In our minds, I think we think that great fear closes us down, and it can. But sometimes great fear can open us up to a love that calls us for reasons both known and unknown. That is what a community like this is for, to help us open to that. Love does not demand that we forfeit our intelligence or fool ourselves. In the video we watched, in an interview taken with King 11 months before his assassination, it's clear he was in the middle of reassessing what had been accomplished and what lie ahead. He assessed that the victories in the early parts of the civil rights movement came, what he called, at bargain prices. They came cheap. They didn't cost the nation anything. And as we know in 2023, when wins are cheap, they can be easily turned back. Right? And that doesn't diminish the win. It doesn't. It just shows us that without risking losing who we think we are, we can never be who we might be. That is challenging, folks. That is challenging enough on an individual level. On a societal level, for many of us, even the most hopeful of us. This is something most of us don't even have the patience to entertain, which is too bad. It is. Like great preachers, Keene had a great imagination. He had a wide knowledge of spiritual texts, of history, of current events, and he used all that in service to the imagination, our collective imagination. But he was not dogmatic. He was continuing to learn up to his last day about the situation we are in and what might be done to alleviate violence, alleviate oppression, alleviate suffering. And he saw the popularity of his message wane. He witnessed cynicism set in. He witnessed bitterness. He witnessed people using keen intelligence to encourage inertness, stuckness, status quo behavior. Do you see that today? He witnessed people using their great capacity for intelligence to dull us morally rather than uplift us, sharpen us, direct us. Keene quoted James Baldwin about being wary of integrating ourselves into a burning house. I love that quote. There's a famous Buddhist story about a person who comes upon a house engulfed in flames. And they see through the windows that there are small children inside playing with their toys. And the person shouts at them, "Get out! Your house is on fire! You'll perish in there." The children look out and they see what they think is a madman shouting at them, which is how most people see prophets. They say through the window, "We don't see any fire. We're fine. There are no flames." And the person outside is concerned and confused about the well-being of children inside, and out of great compassion comes up with a plan. The person sees the children love their toys and are completely distracted and immersed in playing with their toys. So you know what this person does out of great compassion? He tells the children a lie out of compassion. He says, "Out here I have the best toy you have ever seen. Come outside and you will see it. It is better than any toy you've ever had." The children follow. "Oh man, there's a toy out there." They follow, they come outside, and then they see what the madmen saw: the house engulfed in flames. And as the story goes, the house collapsed in flames as soon as all the children were safely outside. I think of that story from time to time. What I appreciate about that story is no time is wasted trying to change the nature of children. There's no time wasted convincing children not to love their toys. The most compassionate thing to do is to work with the circumstances we are given and creatively use those circumstances to benefit people. Children love their toys. We love our toys. Perhaps that can be of use to us. I don't really know what that means today. But perhaps all the things we think are in the way of justice, of love in our society, fear, materialism, greed, hatred, perhaps this too may be of help to us in benefiting our society. I think in many ways Keene's intentions align with the intentions of our church to make the spiritual dimension real in our material lives. To not just worry about a new Jerusalem, but a new New York, a new Youngstown, a new Atlanta. I think that is the most rewarding and most daring thing we can do. It's not threatening to leave possibility as just mere possibility. It's actually threatening to give those possibilities flesh and blood, to make them alive, to dare to think that the promised land could be our land, to dare to think that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice, to not just think that in our minds, but to live that possibility. And in my opinion, that's what we're trying to do here. It's what I'm trying to do, to give life to these possibilities, to live principles we say we value, to use our intelligence, which is great, in service of imagination, of hope, rather than use our intelligence to diminish us, to come together in music and song and fellowship and learn how to come together, to appreciate diversity and work toward equity. It's not really just a Sunday activity. Keene knew that too. As great as his sermons were, he knew the true root of his greatness, and it's the same root as our greatness. Trying to live a principle of love in public and in private, to seek to live it unceasingly. This year, it's so obvious, but I never got this before until this year. I think that's the promised land that King talked about. It wasn't some New Jerusalem. It wasn't some far-off mountaintop. It was the possibility of love that would be alive for us in our real bodies, in our real time, both in public and in private. All that, I think, naturally comes out of that. End to racism, end to global poverty, end to militarism. It ends the moment that we live a principle of love in public and in private. He was encouraged by the practice of Thich Nhat Hanh, who said his practice was to end the war in Vietnam, and the root of war, which is ignorance. Ignorance about who we really are. Ignorance of the fact that we are bound together in a single garment of destiny. Ignorance that the people of all this earth are actually family. That we are so close to each other in ways that we can barely acknowledge. I believe deep in my heart, the moment we love, the promised land arrives. Keene is here with it, never gone, always with us. All those who gave their lives to teach us the nature of our humanity, those who lived and died that we might know who we truly are, they are with us in the promised land. To those struggling to find housing, struggling to flee from war-torn countries, those seeking to have a life in a country which judges them by the color of their skin to this day, they are in the promised land. The moment we love. I think that is the greatness of Keene's legacy. Not that he was leading us to some place or time where the promised land would exist. He was showing us in plain sight the promised land is here in each public act of love. He was showing us And we caught glimpses of it. We did, as a whole society. And it gave us a new vision of life. And then things happened which for most of us caused them to lose faith in that glimpse. It caused them to feel overly optimistic and naive. But those glimpses were real. I think they were real. And those glimpses are not relegated to the past. We catch glimpses of it here and there. Here in Youngstown, Ohio, where we follow the path that Keene followed, that Thich Nhat Hanh followed, that Fannie Lou Hamer followed. They loved to the point of risk. The greatest risk for me was not risking their physical life. They were willing to risk the greatest risk, which I'm inviting all of us to risk coming to terms with their own indifference, their own fear, and their own ignorance. They were willing to risk love when they felt their love was useless, without power, without long-lasting impact. They were willing to continue when the world said they were doing battle with forces that were inevitable, that could not be stopped. They continued even when they were full of doubt about it themselves. They continued in great risk, offering the greatest love. I'm so glad we have a community like this to encourage each other on this journey. In a single moment of love, we overcome the violence of centuries. Do you believe that? Don't worry. It's not necessary to believe it, to live it. Please pray with me. Spirit of love, so grateful for everyone in this service. Kathleen Hogue and her beautiful family, Riz Rayleigh, Jeff Krause, Ryan Striefler, all the people who make this service and this moment possible, Tim Raridan, Andy Crabb, and all the people who showed up on a cold but not so windy January day. So grateful for the friendship that we can find here. Please help us to open ourselves to that friendship this morning over coffee and snacks, saying hello to each other. A moment of love. All this we pray. Amen. Please rise and body your spirit for our closing hymn, We Shall Overcome.
shall live in peace someday.
Extinguish the flame, not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we keep in our hearts until we meet again.
As you depart, please remember the one great fact. You are loved and never truly alone.
I have dreamed a great dream, that your love shall rule our land. Precious Lord, take my hand.